Okay, guys, we're continuing on with chapter 11, and this is a little bit more, less anatomy and more action, seeing size up. So, one of the most important things you'll find in the field, but also in test, is scene safety, scene safety, scene safety. So, in order to do that, you got to be able to size up the scene and the dangers in it. So, elements: checking scene safety, taking standard precautions, noting the mechanism of injury or natures of patient's illness, determining the number of patients, deciding what additional resources may be needed. So, first thing is you're checking scene safety. You're examining the scene, minimizing dangers, planning ahead. When you go into from a house, you don't know what dangers you're walking into, and then also on the highway, you got all kinds of stuff. So when you're on pulling up to the scene, that's when your assessment begins. It actually begins when you're pulling up into the scene, um, not when you get your hands on the patient. So, what dangers do you see? Be on guard for other rescue trucks coming from different directions. If you're on the highway, there's traffic to watch out for. If it's a hazmat situation, you need to know that before you get too close. All those kind of things. But then you take the standard precautions. You're pulling up and you say, okay, I see it's a car wreck. What kind of stuff do I need to wear? Gloves, BSI, scene safe. Um, then, from there, uh, determine the number of patients. And I usually try to do that before I even get on scene. A lot of times you'll hear me radio on when I hear a car wreck. My first question, besides a radio in that I'm responding, but then I want to know how many patients is there possibly going to be? Three, four, five, because that determines how many ambulances we need out on the road, and it also determines if we got to page out again and stuff like that. So you want to have the right resources. So first, so you check for scene safety, standard precautions. You want to know the mechanism of injury absolutely right away. Head-on collision, that's huge. Mechanism of injury. Determine the number of patients, and then what resources do you need on that basis. Fact is if it's a head-on collision, 3 patients, right there you need 2 ambulances minimum, but you actually need 4 or 5 EMTs. So you got to know your resources and what you have. Um, the only predictable thing about emergencies is they're crazy. I mean, you never know what you're going to get on an emergency. Um, they change. It's chaotic. And I want to urge this to you guys is sometimes I've been on car wreck scenes that I think, man, that went perfect. Everything was methodical. We worked well together. Well, the person next to me later is like, man, that was chaotic. Everybody's view of something is going to be different. But no matter how chaotic the scene is, take initiative to bring order to that chaos. You're the EMT, that patient's your priority, and the only thing you can know is that emergencies are unpredictable at every given moment. So watch out. As you near the collision scene, look at and listen for other emergency vehicles. We said that. Look for signs of a collision-related power outage. I mean, truth is, like we've seen during the windstorms, Rapo, we had power lines down, and we had a bunch of people wandering around under those power lines. I was with the ambulance going to a house to take care of a patient, but there was people all over. We had a propane leak, and we had power lines hanging down, and people walking around it all. That's a chaotic situation. Look for those moments. Firemen and sheriff's department are really going to be helping with those things because your objective is the patient, but make sure you're not walking yourself in danger to take care of that patient. Observe traffic flow. Park properly. We're going to train on that as well. We like to park protected by fire trucks. Look for smoke in the direction of the collision scene, but also determine is that smoke from a fire or an anhydrous leak. You want to know what you're walking into. When within, when you're on the scene, look for clues. Indicating escape hazardous material. Escape, like the anhydrous leak I was talking about. If you're going up to a scene and you see smoke, there's a big difference of danger levels between smoke and anhydrous, but they look the same. You can YouTube, there's a video of a police officer, deputy who died thinking it was a fire, and the car pulled the patient out, and he died. And you watch it on the YouTube, it's pretty powerful when they think about the fact is he could have lived if he just took a second and determined the scene safety. Look for collision victims on or near the road. When there's a rollover or a collision, I was on a scene one time where a semi hit a truck two semis collided with one truck, one pickup, and one truck was on fire. The pickup was smashed. A person died in the pickup truck. But all of a sudden, a fireman comes up to me when we think we're done, and he says, "Hey, come here!" And all of a sudden, there is a man about 40 feet into the field. Now, nobody knows how he got there, but he was busted up, broken leg, broken pelvic, broken rib. I mean, he was just in bad shape, and he's in the middle of the field. So you never know where someone's going to be. So look for collision victims on or near the road, or even at a distance. But the main thing is near the road for safety. Look for smoke not seen at a distance, and look for broken utility poles and down power lines. When within sight of a scene, be alert for persons walking alongside of the road toward a collision scene. People can, bystanders are ridiculous, and just be aware of those things. Watch for signals of police officers and other emergency service personnel, so you know where everybody's at and you kind of have a grasp. I mean, first thing when you're going on a scene is scene safety and get your bearings of that environment. Follow instructions of a person in charge. If it's a multi-site deal, there's multiple agencies. There's always going to be a head to that, and find out who that is and submit to them. And if you're the first one on scene, that person is you, really, until someone with a higher authority comes. Don appropriate protective apparel. Getting kind of repetitive here, but a bunker coat and NC approved reflective vest over your coat. Be safe, so people can see you. When it comes to uniforms, I would like to buy some things that are protective on our shirts and coats, but just be careful. Around the wreckage of every vehicle collision, um, specific guidelines. When there are no apparent hazards, extend at least 50 feet in all directions. When there are no apparent hazards, extend at least 50 feet in all directions. In your book, you can see a wreck site, and they have different deal, um, for distances to be. When fuel has been spilled, 100 feet in all directions from wreckage and fuel. So the point is that there's a set protocol for distances for safety, of where you want to be when there's no apparent, you're seen as safety as 50 feet, 100 feet if there's fuel. Um, when a vehicle is on fire, at least 100 feet in all directions. When wires are down, one full span of wires away from the poles to which broken wires are attached. Just different protocols, and they're all in your book. And just like I said, I can't cover all this stuff without reading the whole chapter to you. Just be sure to go through your book. But key points is there is protocols, of how that's the establishing a danger zone. So the danger zone when a car is on fire is 100 feet, and danger zone for wires down is one wire span away from the one it's connected to. When a hazardous material is involved, we got to check the book, and we got a book in every ambulance, and also I believe every fire truck. Evaluate for threat of violence, fighting or loud voices, weapons visible or in use, signs of alcohol or other drug use, unusual silence. That's huge with abuse, knowledge of prior violence. This is unfortunately too relevant to our area. But when you get there, the scene to be safe for you is, a fighting distance. Watch for loud voices. If there's a dispute, in your book there was a cool article I read of a new EMT that was talking about an abuse situation. Read that on page 268 or 9. I'm sorry. It's just a really cool story. But the point is, I went on a scene one time for a guy who fell, hit his head, and he was drunk and intoxicated, sitting in his chair, shirts off, sweatpants, typical scene that you'd see in a movie. And I'm kneeling down in front of him, doing vitals and checking him out and trying to control the bleeding of his head. And he pulls a gun on me. Literally pulls a gun on me. And I reacted, disarmed him, and deputies were outside. So I disarmed him and gave the gun to the deputies. Now deputies were on scene. But the point is, you never know when danger is going to rise. These scenes can be unpredictable. And so you want to watch that too. When there's a drunk guy, make sure there's deputies with you. I mean, they were with me, but they were outside. Probably would have helped if they were inside. A little bit more on that, but always want to watch for those things. Alcohol, weapons. And although any call can present a potential safety hazard, what types of calls might pose a potential threat? Although any call can represent a potential safety hazard, what types of calls might pose a potential threat? Think about that as you're going through this chapter, because you'll show up to potential safety hazards, car wrecks, hazmat, all that kind of stuff, potential threats, domestic violence, methed out people, alcohol. You never know because they're not thinking clearly. Animals, aren't they cute? Like how the slide says it. More animals, more animals, more animals. That looks like Michigan right there, folks. Um, some things you want to look at. Why I think they're putting them in here. It's in your book. Different things, but animals, can be dangerous. You want to watch, for animals, bites, attacks. They want to be too friendly, whatever the case might be. But when you come into a house, you can see there's some hazards there with no porch. Winter, it's very hard to safely bring someone in and out of a house. Want to watch those kind of things. Um, and I've had that. You got to get out, have your partner shovel the porch so you can get the stretcher in and out without hurting someone. Electrical hazards. I mean, like I said in Arapahoe, those things happen, and you just got to keep your distance. Fires. We don't see a lot of house fires in Cheyenne County, but you can get. I've seen a lot of semi fires. With trucks catching on fire. Um, so you just want to keep your distance, but yet respond to the situation. Um, Plane crashes, car wrecks. I mean, you can see they're a great mechanism of injury when you're coming up on the scene. The collision there could definitely, you got to look at another thing you look at. It's not a very good picture here to be able to get a determination. But when you see collisions, one thing you always want to look at is the mechanism of injuries, the damage to the car. But what's the windshield look like? Is there a head shaped? We call it. I can't remember what we call it. Spider web cracks or whatever. I can't remember exactly. But when you see where a head could have hit, you got to report that, and then that also gives you a mechanism of injury. They might be fine walking around with their adrenaline pumping, but if their head hit that windshield at any given moment, things could go south. So we always look at those kind of things. So standard precautions, body substance annihilation, BSI. So remember that BSI. So in your practicals, in your hands-on, and in your test, BSI, seeing safe, is always first. If you do not say BSI, you fail. It doesn't matter. You got to remember that. Always have personal protective equipment, PPE. So a lot of times in practicals, you'll say PPE, BSI, seeing safe, just before you go on scene. And like I said, it is a fail, and it's not my thing. It's a state thing. They will fail you. Natural or nature of the call, determine why EMS has been called. So like I said, the mechanism of injury, MOI, and the nature of illness, NOI. So the mechanism of injury, MOI, is determine why you're there. The car wreck, the site, uh, snow like the porch we saw in the house, the snow on the steps, ice on the steps, and you see someone laying in a ditch when you get there. So mechanism of injury is they slipped and fell on ice. The mechanism of injury, ice, car wreck, mechanism of injury, head-on collision, steering wheel to the chest, all those kind of things determined as you pull up on scene. Nature of illness, COPD, emphysema, cancer, Parkinson's, what's the nature of the illness? Flu, when flu season comes around, we can be pretty busy from December and January with just flu symptoms. Um, Mechanism of injuries, forces that cause injury. Understanding forces can predict injury patterns. Can be very useful in predicting injuries associated with certain types of motor vehicle crashes. So mechanism of injury, boom, right there. Exterior damage may lead you to suspect certain types of injuries. You don't really see a head trauma. You don't see the spider web looking in the windshield, but the fact is it's all busted up. It looks like it might have rolled a little bit with the damage to the roof. So you want to look at those things. And I've had rollovers where people are totally fine, mechanism of injury is horrible, but they refuse transport. The downside is you don't know what's going on inside the body. You don't have x-ray vision. So that's where you really want to work on trying to get the patient convinced to go to the hospital. Motor vehicle collisions is head-on collisions, up and over injury pattern. Where they go up and over the steering wheel and hit the windshield with their head. So if they hit their windshield with a head-on collision, so you can look at a mechanism of injury is there's going to be some head trauma, some chest trauma, and some possible pelvic and leg trauma, breaking on the steering wheel, down and under injury, airbag deployment. Um, it would lead to suspect, certain types of injuries as well. Burns to the face, broken neck. I've heard of people breaking their neck on those things. There's the clue I'm talking about right there. It's like a spider web um, crack on the windshield, and basically it's because the head hits and then it spider webs out from where the head hit. That is a clue of a head trauma, and you want that looked at. I mean, that is one of those situations where we really don't want someone to refuse, um, but that gives you a really good MOI, a mechanism of injury. Motor vehicle collisions, rear end collisions, side impact collisions, um, rollovers. And you can see in your book they have good pictures where steering wheel could hit the chest. Um, um, just looking through the book a little bit. Airbag. I like that. And actually, if you go to page 272 and at figure A, that's a perfect example of a head-on collision. It's pretty much you're going to see that. Like, bam, the head's in the windshield, neck is being flipped back, the head's flipping back, chest to the steering wheel, or steering wheel to the chest, I'm sorry, and the pelvic damage from the bottom of the steering wheel. But also, I've seen a lot of dashboard incidents where the legs smash against the dashboard. The rollover collision. When you look at that, a side impact collision may cause head and neck injuries as well as injuries to the chest, abdomen, pelvic, thigh. Rollover collision, an unrestrained person will suffer multiple impacts and possibly multiple injuries. The mechanism of injury is everything on that one. I mean, if you look at the picture, that is flat out accurate. I mean, it is hard. With rollovers, there is so much damage done to that human body. It's scary. So the mechanism of injury, so like for example, the side impact boom, you get the mechanism there. It hits the windshield, arms, the whole left side is gonna be busted up. But with a rollover, everything can be busted up, and that's just get air life moving on that moment. Um, Typical as if there's a rollover, I always get air life on standby until I'm on scene, and then I determine where I want air life or if I can cancel them, because a lot of rollovers it's just a brutal deal. Um, so yeah, a lot of damages. So falls, adults more than 20 feet is bad. Really, a fall at any feet is bad, but they like to look at adults more than 20 feet. Child under 15 years more than 10 feet, 2 or 3 times child's height. That's kind of how you gauge. So when they do fall, the hospital asks and in your reporting they'll ask um, that question, like how far was the fall? 10 feet, 20 feet. Kids, it's 2 or 3 times more their height. Um, but the characteristic of the fall may provide valuable clues to a patient's injuries. So falls are another cause of injury, but why did they fall? How did they fall? Important factors to consider are the height from which the patient fell, the surface they landed on, and the part of the patient that hit the surface and anything that interrupts the fall. So basically, the height of the fall, what part of the body hit the ground first, and what was the surface that it hit? Was it a concrete floor, dirt floor, highway, and then also was there anything that was in the way of the fall? So did they hit a tree branch first, then the ground? All that's going to be crucial to do. So you're kind of playing cop at times when you're on scene. And then you got the blunt traumas and penetrating traumas from a fall. Here's a mechanism of injury, a severe fall. So obviously you can see that guy probably fell off the rafters of that house that he's building. Nothing was in the way of the fall, unless he hit those 2x4s first, then the ground, but it looks like he just fell flat on his back. So that's what you report, and that's how you respond. Some good things on that would be, head to toe assessment, see if, awake, alert, and oriented or not. You find out if he's awake, alert, and oriented. Head to toe assessment, find any damage, intervene with them with splinting, and put a SAM splint on him if his pelvis is broke, scoop him up, put him on a vacuum mattress that's already on a stretcher, and all that, and make sure it's clear C-spine or not clear C-spine. But you do almost everything for the same thing for every fall, but how they fell, where they fell, how far they fell, and if there's anything in their way determines the injuries that you're going to work on. Important factors: height from which patient fell, surface, part of the patient that hit the surface, anything that interrupted the fall, which I already cleared all that. Now, penetrating trauma is an injury caused by objects that passes through the skin or other tissue. So if he fell and landed on a rake and the rake went through his abdomen or his back, that's going to be a penetrating trauma, and you'll have to be specific on that. In your report, they asked, was it blunt, penetrating, classified by the velocity of the item that caused the injury. So, if you fall and fell on a rake, how far the drop was determines how fast you hit the velocity that you hit it. And um, penetrating trauma, low velocity, knife injuries, damage limited to area penetrated by maybe multiple wounds. If it's a knife wound, someone stabs you and they stab you again. Medium velocity is a handgun, shotgun, and high velocity, the rifle. Injuries may be anywhere in the body at those moments. Damage directly from the projectile is pressure-related damage or cavitation. And we'll go through more wounds in other chapters, what cavitation really is and pressure-related damage, but it's in your book on this chapter 2, I believe, like a penetrating trauma or injury caused by an object that passes through the skin. So projectile, the bullet itself will damage anything in its path. The damage depends on the size of the bullet, its path, and whether its fragments break up into smaller projectiles. With the fragment taking different paths, the path of the bullet, once it is inside the body, is unpredictable since it may be deflected by bone or other tissue onto a totally different course. There is often damage to organs and tissues that are not in straight line between the entrance and exit wounds. So the bullet goes in there, hits a rib, bounces off the rib, and changes direction. There's a lot. It can happen with that. The cavitation this means that the energy of the bullet as it enters the body creates a pressure wave that causes a cavity considerably greater than the size of the bullet. This cavity is temporary, but it may damage items in its path. So there you go. And just catch up on blunt force and all that. Reason a patient called EMS, the nature of the illness. Basically, why did they call you? To begin identifying the natures of a patient's illness during the scene size up, you must scan the entire scene. What are they, and that does help. I mean, that is a crucial thing right there, guys, is when you are on scene, get everything you can, scan it all. Find out, they'll tell you why they called you, but also look around as if they're sick, look, did they eat recently? Is there a plate of food there? Does the food look good? Does it look bad? Was it food poisoning? What kind of drugs do they have on the end table by their bed? Where did they take it if they needed to, or did they take too much? All that kind of stuff will gauge on how you can help them and transport them. Actively look for any additional patients, such as a pedestrian or a cyclist. If there's a situation and sometimes EMTs get so focused on one person they forget there might be someone else there. Information be obtained from many sources: the patient, family members, or bystanders, and the scene. So play cop, ask the patient, but also ask any bystanders standing around, did you see anything? I had one with an epileptic seizure at a store, and the main thing is that nobody saw the person fall, but everybody heard it. So as they heard it, they were looking around and found him, but so nobody saw it. But I asked bystanders, what did they hear? Did it sound like hitting the floor? Did it sound like hitting a shelf? Because that will determine the kind of head injury that I might expect with that person. So I asked the bystanders. Then I look around the scene. Do I see any damage on the shelf? Do I see any food knocked on the floor? Off the shelf. So the scene is a bystander as well to help you gauge that situation. How many patients are present? Number of patients and adequacy resources that we covered in the beginning is if there's 4 people in the car and the car rolls, you got 4 patients, what kind of resources do you need to make that happen? Right? You need quite a bit and need to get them moving. Preferably, the longer you wait, the more dangerous it gets for the patient and for yourself. Does the situation require specialized resources? Fire, technical rescue, hazardous material response? And if it's an anhydrous leak that you come up on, sorry guys, I hit the table. So one thing you got to think about is you show up on a wreck, you got 4 patients in a car plus a truck driver, so 5 total. And so you need, how many ambulances do you need for that? Well, Typical ambulance can take 2 patients, but some of them can't. So one, two, three, five. So 5 patients, 3 ambulances, 4 would be better, right? So to help with the situation. But then what you also need to know is, okay, so now there's an anhydrous leak because it was an anhydrous truck that was hit. Well, now you need hazmat. So you probably need fire to help you get anybody out of the car that you need. So extrication. But then you also will need to get hazmat moving because we need hazmat there for the anhydrous leak and the fire department. So you got to look at all the resources, and you as the EMT have a lot of authority on those scenes to make that stuff happen. Um, so there's times where you have only 2 patients, and one's a bariatric patient. So get on the horn and get fire there to help you with some lift assist. It's just there's a lot of different scenarios to go on, but it's very important that you scene size up, BSI scene safe, and have the proper resources there to help you. So reviewing this is scene size up is the first part of the patient assessment process. It is important during scene size up to determine what, if any, threats there may be to your own safety and to the safety of others at the scene. Then to take appropriate standard precautions. BSI scene safe. Um, you know, get the next important thing is to get the nature of the call, the mechanism of injury, and the patient's illness. And finally, you must take into account the number of patients and other factors at the scene to determine if you will need additional help. Determine what, if any, threats there may be to your own safety and to the safety of other scenes. Take appropriate standards and precautions. Kind of repetitive. But anyway, you kind of get the gist of the way it is there. So questions to consider, I like these, is for each of these dangers, what action must be taken to remain safe at the scene of a collision scene? Leaking gasoline, what safety measures will you take with that? Well, obviously that's going to change your danger zone, your scene danger zone. So you're going to be extended that much more. Toxic or hazardous material spills, well, it depends what that is. But again, your danger zone is going to expand at that point. You're going to stage your ambulance further away out of that danger zone so you're safe. Hazmat's going to have to get on the scene. You're going to have to get firemen on the scene if they're not already there. And the same with a vehicle on fire. If the vehicle's on fire, that's dangerous. So obviously, if the people are out of the car, firemen are going to have to help. If there's patients in that car and that car's on fire, it's unfortunate, but you can't do anything till that car is out of fire um, or taken care of. So you want firemen on the scene, and also you got to look at the safety again, the danger scene. The border of that is going to extend out down power lines. Remember, it's going to be one power line away that the broken power line is connected to, that you're going to be staged out for safety, and get KC Electric out there if they're not already there. Now, chances are we have an amazing fire department and they're always on top of getting that kind of stuff done, but you have to consider these things as you drive up on scene. Scene safety. What are common mechanisms of injury patterns for the following situations? A head-on collision. Look at your picture again in your book and memorize that. So a head-on collision, the mechanism of injury is going to be, the head hitting the windshield, hyperextending the neck, steering wheel to the chest, and pelvis, and potential leg damage from the dashboard. A rear end collision, just think of the mechanism of injury there. So you're driving, picture your body in the car, you get rear-ended, you're going to bounce back, and there is damage to organs. Even if you do not hit something with your body, organs can get damaged from just bouncing around. So look at the mechanism of injury to a rear end collision. And a fall from a height. What are some injuries, mechanism of injury there? The fact is how far did they fall? What was the surface that they landed on? Concrete, asphalt, dirt? What part of their body hit it first? And was there anything in the way of that fall? And that will determine injuries there. Because if they're falling at 50 feet off a roof, but their legs hit scaffolding first and then they hit the ground, you got potential broken legs, then whatever hit the ground first, and also it determines what they landed on. So good things to consider. A critical thinking point, you are called to the scene of a shooting at a fast food restaurant. En route, you plan your scene size up strategy. What actions do you anticipate taking on arrival? So that's a great question, and I want you guys to look at it, think about it, talk to whoever's around you, and go through that a little bit, and maybe we'll talk about it in class as well when we're together. But anyways, a lot shorter chapter than chapter 10. So that's good. But I hope you guys are getting a lot through this. Thanks for doing it. And again, we'll be in touch, and we'll talk more and go through this in class.